There are so many people I haven't seen for such a long, long time, since maybe before the COVID. I see Heleno from Goiás, I see Elisa from Rio de Janeiro, and Peter O'Neill, one José Villani from Argentina, and La Pampa. I see so many people I like so much. So this is a privilege. And I have survived the COVID. You cannot imagine how pleased I am to be part of this round table to introduce my dear friends and colleagues, Alzira, Lucy, Luciana, and Maria José. And I take the opportunity to say how much I admire their work as writers, critics, professors, translators. As a tribute to their various achievements in translation, I'd like to stress the immense difficulties they encounter while looking at the words on the page to be translated. The only way I can find to show my admiration is to quote from Drummond's poem, which invites us, and now you have to bear with me, this is my literal translation, I quote, to contemplate the words. Each one of them has 1,000 secret faces under a neutral face which asks you, without any interest, for the poor or terrible meaning that you give it. Have you brought the key? And now in Portuguese, if you allow me, because Drummond must be quoted in Portuguese. Chega mais perto e contempla as palavras. Cada uma tem 1000 faces secretas sob a face neutra e te pergunta, sem interesse pela resposta, pobre e terrível, que lhe deves. Trouxeste a chave. I am sure that most of the time, the four of you have the key to the 1,000 secret faces of each word to be translated. Now, Alzira, Luciana first. Luciana will present. I have to. Luciana Carvalho Fonseca is a professor in the Department of Modern Languages at USP, my colleague. She has a law degree from the Federal University of Pará and a master's and doctoral degrees from the University of São Paulo. She's part of 2 postgraduate programs, Letra and Linguistic and Literary Studies in English. She was a lecturer at the Catholic University of São Paulo, São Paulo. She completed a postdoctoral research at the University of Leipzig, Germany. 2022-24 on interpreting studies and maternal health, and was a visiting researcher at the International Institute of Social Studies at Erasmus University, Rotterdam, in The Hague, in the same period. She is currently a researcher at the William Butler Yeats Chair of Art Studies. Her research themes are translation and the intersection of power and activism, decolonial feminist translation, translation historiography, 19th century women translators, legal translation, and English language in higher education institutions. Congratulations, you're done. You have done a lot.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your words and kind presentation. I would also like to thank Laura for inviting me to be on this panel and also to be closer to the work of the Irish Studies Chair. It's a true honor. Today I'll be speaking very briefly about better? Can you hear me better now? Yes? Okay, so, right, just let me know if you can't. So I'll be sharing with you some insights on translating and empire. And this has been triggered by a recent translation project we've done with graduate students at USP. I'll show you the book in a minute. First of all, I'd just like to recapitulate some of our history in terms of Portuguese colonialism and the colonial enterprise. It's worth remembering that the Portuguese spent, I think, the entire 15th century obsessed with reaching the Indies, right? And the Portuguese colonial enterprise under Dom Henrique was always stressing the importance of obtaining African interpreters to enable the conquest and the exploitation of the coast of Africa first and then all the way to the Indies. And after decades of sailors trying to reach the Indies with thousands of lives and dozens of vessels and shipwrecks and attacks, Gama lands there, not unaided, obviously. He comes with many people and he meets many go-betweens in the way who facilitated his journey. And one thing people don't really talk about when they are talking about the crossings of the seas in general, right? I don't want to use the word discovery, but of conquest, right? They usually don't stress the roles of these go-betweens. So the Da Gama crew, for instance, had 17 tongues. 4 of them were African tongues who were fluent in many African languages of the West Coast. There were 3 Portuguese tongues who were fluent in Bantu and Arabic, and 10 banished and outcast persons who were fluent in various languages. So since the beginning of the Portuguese colonial enterprise, which started in Susa, and when they were going around the African coast, they were concerned in obtaining and training interpreters so their travel and their journey and their economic agenda and religious agenda could be rolled out. And there was a comparison to the importance of canons and interpreters off the coast of Africa, and they would say that the interpreters were even more important than the canons. And this was because without knowing the language, the exploitation and all their activities would be delayed. They it would need time, it would require time for them to be able to master the language, train go-betweens, and they realized this very early in the beginning of the colonial enterprise, so they became experts in producing interpreters. And these interpreters originated from several places. They would stay, they would pick them up, they would push them off boats so they could swim to the shore and wait for 5 years and then come back to see how they fared, right? And the training was harsh. But what happened when they arrived in Brazil? When Pedro Alves Cabral set out for the Indies with a stopover in the Americas, they found, and they did also have tongues in their crew, they found that the languages that they spoke, they brought with them maybe more than 20 languages on the ship, because there were also around 1,500 people in the Portuguese, in Cabral's crew. But what they found was that there were no languages compatible with the languages that they spoke. So they just stopped, left some people there, and then came back sometime later. If we think that the Portuguese, by the 15th century, had already developed a program to deal with the communication, right? This was state-of-the-art technology in terms of training interpreters. And interpreters are important in our art history. If we think of this is one example, the foundation of Symposium, 1532, that is 32 years later after the previous journey in the previous life. And when the Portuguese are met by the natives, they are also met by 3 other go-betweens, and they are portrayed in this picture. So João Ramalho, Antônio Rodrigues, and Cosme Fernandes Pessoa, who are well known in the history of São Paulo. And they were already living among the indigenous population here. And João Ramalho, which I think is probably the most well-known among them, had indigenous family. He was completely assimilated and knew the languages that the Portuguese required to start exploring the interior of the land. And it's interesting because more or less in the same decades, we were also experiencing the grammatization of Portuguese for imperialistic purposes. It's worth noticing that Spain, the Gramática de la Lengua Castellana, dates from 1492, which was the first imperial grammar. And this I'm quoting from Antonio de Librijas. Actually, he wasn't the one who wrote it, but it was written on his behalf. When he presented the grammar to Isabella of Castile, right? And he said, "After your highness has subjected barbarous peoples and nations of various tongues, with conquest will come the need for them to accept the laws that the conqueror imposes on the conquered, and among them our language." So, as we can see, we don't really have to say or highlight the importance of language. We just need to look at the facts. And translation was present in the making of grammars, in the teaching of Portuguese, and also in the learning of the indigenous languages in Brazil, because there were also grammars of indigenous languages. We had Gramática da Língua Brasílica from Padre José Teixeira, which was the first one, and many others. At some point in the 18th century, we had an English-Portuguese grammar as well, and this was and the teaching was done through translation. Translation was a device, and here I'm quoting Giorgio Agamben when he defines apparatus, right? When he defines that anything can be an apparatus. Anything that has the capacity to orient, determine, intercept, model, control, or secure the gestures, behaviors, opinions, or discourses of living beings. And he gives the example of language the example and the importance of translation as a colonial and imperialist apparatus to name, to obtain epistemic spaces, and so on. And it was interesting because when Cabral arrived in Brazil, actually when São Vicente was founded, before it was founded, it was already on the map. So it's not that they were coming to another place. Someone already had named it São Vicente as well, which is also a mark of imperialism. And recently, we've had a very positive experience within the University of São Paulo with the support of the Irish chair. We have been translating collectively Jane Ohlmeyer's Making Empire, which is a wonderful book. We have some people who are on the team here. Victor is, and I can't see any of you today, but yesterday on Friday I saw a number of you. So these are students and professors. So Luciana, that's me, and Mariana Bofarigi, who you know very well. And all the others are graduate students at the University of São Paulo. They're studying English and translation, and many of them Irish studies as well. So when we have the opportunity of working with such a rich work, and if we think of that some centuries before the Portuguese invasion of America, the English were already colonizing Ireland, right, where empire was also built on translation. And it's interesting because when I say it's built on translation, it also meant that it's built on erasure, right? Whereas translation has been a tool for empire, and we have the experience of bringing histories of colonization together to better understand our processes of subjectification. And when we are able to tell and retell histories through translation, we are employing translation in another way, not to erase, not to dehumanize, but we are employing translation decolonially, right? So what decolonial translation does is that it challenges the constitution of, the constituting erasures of the colonial difference. So it's counter-translation as well for in another life. So this is the team. We had some discussions. Laura was also with us on this day. We had the opportunity of talking to Jane about some choices that we had to make, because of course we do have colonial histories with many similarities, but there are so many specificities. And I heard Robinson Crusoe being mentioned today at least 3 times, and I brought my copy, right? And on this, and as you know, there's a chapter which says, I become a Brazilian planter. And it's interesting because he says, I have not been long here, but being recommended to the house of a good, honest man like himself who had an ingenio, that's the word he uses. I lived with him, ingenio as they call it, that is a plantation and a sugar house. So the word plantation is all over Jane's work, right? Because they are talking about the planters, the settlers, and the plantations, but we don't call plantations in Portuguese, right? We call them latifundios, or in this case, engenhos. So we had many fruitful discussions on how to adapt the terms, how sometimes we had to explain them. We also were critical of the words that the author employed, and asked her if we could, change them so they could be read in Brazilian Portuguese in a way that we are more used to. So we simply just, change the word discovery for conquest. That's one example. Concepts such as big house and house evidentiary, which are completely different, and they have also had to be explained in the book. And to this end, of course, we are writing a short introduction to the translation, explaining the main translation choices, but I have listed some of them here. There is a lot of reference to America, and when we reference America in Portuguese, right, so that was another tricky thing we had to go around. Another thing, mixed marriages and intermarriages are, the way Brazilians understand it is very different from the Irish, so that was another challenge. Words such as degenerate and which involve other epistemic choices, right, in terms of the culture that they're coming from. So that was another challenge. All the words related to nobility, because we have our own, right? And then they are not the same, because ours comes from the Portuguese, obviously. So we had to, actually the strongest point here in this, in terms of the vocabulary when it came to specificities in Irish terminology was that we had experts, right? The experts were translating with us, so that was. So they usually they would lecture us on the topics, and it was really it was very exciting and wonderful. And indentured labor, and again, when we speak of forced labor here in Brazil, it's something else when you speak in other in Ireland in the case. So these are just some flashlights, well, some. And I'd just like to share, and I'll stop here, with a short paragraph, or maybe 2 paragraphs of our introduction, which is still work in progress. We're doing it at many hands, as you probably saw in the first slide of the cover. Translating involves transposing the ideas of the original text into Brazilian Portuguese and immersing ourselves in the historical narrative and cultural construction of Ireland, which brought to light aspects of Irish history that increased our understanding of the political and social dynamics that shaped the Irish identity. In addition to broadening our own perspective on the colonization process of Brazil. A collective translation process is an opportunity to co-construct knowledges about our own roots and the structures that underpin society, and to collectively examine historical narratives of other nations while grasping how these narratives provide us with a more comprehensive and critical view of our own colonial history and subjectivities. So thank you very much, and this is it.
Holds a PhD in linguistics and English literature and 2 postdoctoral degrees at USP in Irish literature. As a creative writer, she has published over 20 books. Her works have been included in national and international anthologies in the United States, Germany, France, Mexico, Uruguay, Argentina, and Peru. Congratulations for your creative works. And she has been awarded several literary prizes, such as the Prêmio Jabuti in 2016. She is a retired professor from the Federal University of Paraná and currently teaches translation at the Catholic University of Paraná. She has translated several authors as Harry James, Virginia Woolf, E. Cummings, Seamus Heaney, Gertrude Stein, among many others. Lucy, congratulations, and now you're doctorate.
Is it, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for the presentation. It's an honor to be here. it's more than a pleasure, it's an honor, truly, and I want to thank you for all the support. This is special. People, I think that in this room, everyone shares the same opinion, that we possibly wouldn't be here if not for Professor Munira and Professor Laura. So I'm thanking you with my deepest heart. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 anthologies I've translated in circumstances that are totally different, and this is exactly what I will bring to this discussion here. So the very first considerations is that in the translation of poetry, we have these 2 big questions that appear right in the beginning. It's like translation. See that the word always involves this, let's say, curious aspect, and also the translation of poetry. I'm considering the relationship, people in general, not people here in this room, but the relationship people have with poetry. See? So the translation of poetry may lead us to a few extra considerations. So, and which are these? See, we would have questioning the translatability or untranslatability of poetry. Then, is it a commercial project or is it a private project? This is a very big difference because we have the market in some instances. So this is something that will imprint, let's say, differences in the results. And the third consideration regards the reading public. What is the profile of the reading public? So this is my choice after many years translating. So I will mention this, but of course, as a translator, after some time, we mix many tendencies, many theories, and it is the practical and the very practical act of translating that leads you to sort of an autonomy which is limited somehow, because every single project will be a new one. See? I brought this reference here. I do have a frame of reference, that is the functionalist theory, and the name speaks for itself. A text should function, see, for the reader. And according to that, we should pay attention, special attention, to the translation act, besides to the translation process. I will quote from Christian Nord, who is one of the most important names in the functionalist theory. And she mentions that the function of the target text, the TT there in the slide, is not arrived automatically from an analysis of the source text, but is pragmatically defined by the purpose. See, this is the key word for that. The purpose of the intercultural texts transfer. So I think that this is important here. I will show you a few examples and situations, see, regarding these Irish poets, but keeping this in mind, see, the purpose of the translations. So in the whole process, we cannot disregard the extra-textual and intertextual factors of the source text, which should be mapped. This is something really, for me, according to my modest experience, but I think that mapping everything is essential. Should be mapped before the translation. And Christian Nord says translating means comparing cultures. This is why I brought this authors here. There are many approaches, and as I said, we will mix many of these tendencies. Let's just make the list here, and I will avoid torturing you with explanations, but just to give you an idea, the metatextual approach, the interlinear approach, the philological, the single dominant approach, a dominant plus subdominant approach, the cultural transposition. No, it has no sorry. No problem. The dominant plus subdominant approach, the cultural transposition, and the author's translation, or also called the poetic translation. So, here we go. Which are the strategies? And there I will show you. I've translated this poet, Elaine Nihuilino, very much reputed in Ireland and around the world. And I organized this, and I also translated this other one that is Moya Cannon, another contemporary poet, and more recently I've translated this book here, 100 Poems by Seamus Heaney. What is the big difference between these projects? This is what I'm going to show you. So first, the purpose, remember the word purpose. My purpose was to translate the anthologies of 3 Irish poets. This is a very general things. Let's see the subtleties of all that. So there are many elements to be preserved, plus some ones to be adapted. And the third, let's say, step in all this process, to consider the interplay between extra-textual and intra-textual factors. Who was the initiator of that? In the 2 anthologies of Nihuilino's and Cannon, I was the initiator. See? So the freedom we have in this sort of project is really we cannot compare to the other situation that is in Heaney's case, that an editor, a publishing house had this project, and then I was simply the translator in this case, see, with very little interferences in the whole process. So the questions that appear here: why should Irish poets, which are the text producers, technically speaking, why should Irish poets be translated? Next, how to organize the anthology as an attractive organism. The third question, to who are the receivers of this anthology? And the last, as for cultural distance. And folks, we all love Irish culture, and it seems so easy to bring this to talk about that, but the readers and the market will define all the vectors for all that. This should be considered in depth. See, who will read these anthologies in a Brazilian market? And with the strategies the publishing houses develop. This is a very serious aspect. So as for cultural distance, to what extent are Brazilian readers familiar to Irish culture, to Irish literature, or to Irish contemporary poetry? All of that to be considered. Strategies. The target text should function for Brazilian readers. There is a quotation of Christian Nord again, but I will skip that. Solutions for that, or strategies for that. All the 3 anthologies have introductions. The first 2 ones are written by myself. See, I wrote the introductions. And this one, we have a special guest, that is Professor Laura, who wrote about Seamus Heaney. It facilitates a lot to contextualize. See? So we need this an extra textual resource, let's say. And so we had introductions in the 3 of them, the contextualization of the poet, plus the main characteristics of them. there is this thorough selection in the two first ones, see, Nequillinums and Canon. I made this selection. I will show you this in detail. There are notes to the poems, and I think that this is another very important thing. If you will have the opportunity to say something from this perspective as a translator, it was not possible in his case, for instance, because this is, let's say, this book is very famous. I mean, the original is already very famous as it is, and it was organized by his family. So even the arrangements for the translation were very, it was a very delicate process, see? So I was not able to add any notes to the original. And the translation problems, we call the so-called translation problems, of a lexical order related to Ireland, historical aspects, cultural references, specific terms, Gaelic words and expressions, archaic words, geographical references, historical and political facts or contexts. So, presenting you the first anthology by poet Eleni Huilenon. Here we have her work. Huilenon was born in 1942 in Cork. She's a very well-established writer. Which are the characteristics? Next. Things the translator has to pay attention. See, otherwise there are so many implications in all this translational act. So, main characteristics and things to be preserved, this indirection and obliqueness by an elusive or even an emotional style. When we say an emotion for Brazilians, this is something we have to elaborate. See? And what marks her poetry, the exploration of contrastive viewpoints and complex indeterminacies. She explores universal concerns, aging, identity, religion, and death. She has this keen sense of history, and she uses mythology and legend. And the last remark, she has this deep interest in language and identity, Catholicism and religious concerns, familial and communal traditions, history, in the sort of a rereading of the past, and national pride. There is a quotation by Heine just to promote sort of an interplay there. And this is finally the selection and the anthology involving 6 books, 43 poems. It's a bilingual publication, and the title came from, because look, in Portuguese, if we have an anthology of Eleni Huilenon, very few people know who is Eleni Huilenon and could identify the importance of an anthology. It's much more an introduction to a new poet in the Brazilian scene. So I took a line from one of her poems, and the poem is Early Recollections, in which we have this line, I discovered the habits of moss. And from this line of this specific poem, I named this anthology. So the title came from one of the poems, trying to produce something organic, as we mentioned before. And here we have Eleni Huilenon when she came to Brazil to the release of this anthology. The poem I'm going to, please, the poem I brought here, of course we won't have time to discuss this in depth, but this poem, and many critics have pointed this out, this poem has so many implications, even in English. And I will show you the transposition, see, the strategies, and the aspects that should be preserved. It starts with the title, that is gloss, close, glass. Why is that so sophisticated and gives rise to so many, as I said, historical implications, lexical and so on? Because Elaine is exploring this duality, and she puts sort of an intriguing condition for the persona of the poem itself. So I've marked a few elements here in the poem, and let me explain. And this is a very nice coincidence, because this poem by Elaine Huilenan has somehow it brings a reference of the poem by Drummond you just read, because yeah. So I was very glad because of this atmosphere. It was announced since the beginning. What is the theme of this poem? For someone who is connected to the word, I mean us, this poem will resonate. It talks about the suffering that the writer, locked in his library or in his mind, goes through until he manages to find the exact word, as Drummond said, the exact word that will guarantee his release. So, what is the play here in terms of meaning and in lexical terms? There is a negotiation between all that. The ambiguity of expressions, forming the semantic network. So gloss in English means interpretation or annotation. Glass in Irish means lock and also means green. And close means a Scottish garden with a courtyard. And all these three words or terms are very close to the word close. So the way we pronounce that, and Huilenan plays with all that, the sonority. She's very much attached to musicality, by the way. So there is this closed, close or too close, sonically keeping this proximity with gloss. So the way we pronounce this, see? We also have other implications. The words from the Gaelic that appear. There is no sense in keeping these words in Gaelic for Brazilian readers. We cannot, we really don't know how to pronounce them, see? So it would establish a barrier, and I will use notes to explain that. And by the end of the poem, we have the last stanza, which is really wonderful, somehow giving the key, as Professor Munira mentioned. The language reached is Irish, Gaelic. In Irish, a single word indicates his, hers, and theirs. How can a Brazilian reader know that? It's impossible. So, thank God, it is self-explanatory. I will read this. I will read the poem, just the last. Please, the next one. Oh, this is what I've just explained. See, the words, the ambiguity, and the next, please, Luciana. Yeah, I will read just the last part of that to show you that, well, there's this. Os trapos da linguagem se agitam como galos dos ventos, como algas que mudam conforme a maré, à medida que ele vira para frente e para trás as páginas do espelho, as palavras fluidas e furtivas, como as coxas sedosas do gato, fluindo pelos vãos da cerca, suavemente, até que ele alcança a língua que não tem palavra para seu nem para sua, e é detido de súbito, como um menino numa história ao deparar com uma porta fechada. Quem é que ele escuta ofegante do outro lado? O sopro da respiração dela está tornando viva a fechadura fechada. So, what is the implication of this, let's say, gaming, almost gaming, that the sonority should be even explained to the Brazilian river, see? But fortunately, the poem works without that because of the theme. Talking a little bit about Moya canon, because there is this scarcity of time, so I'll just show you another situation regarding Moya's anthology. Well, Moya canon is another well-established name in terms of Irish poetry. There is this list of her books. The main characteristics and themes we find in her work: preoccupations with landscape and seascape, with archaeology, with music, with language itself, and with our visceral attachment to the beauty of the earth. Hints of eco-criticism, see? And there's a quotation by Ivan Bolan about Moya canon. And this is much more visual, what I will show you. There is this poem, Carrying the Songs, and there was a line. The poem was not difficult to be translated, no extra implications, but there was a line that made me crazy because, see, literally, and the line is that, who slept over a rope in a bothy? And this is slept over a rope. See, I could not solve that. What's the meaning of that? Then I translated that literally, and in Portuguese it made no sense also. See, and then later on, after researching on that, I discovered the following. Well, here we have the way I kept this in Portuguese. Dormiram sobre uma corda numa cabana. See, for a Brazilian reader, dormir sobre uma corda makes no sense. But look at the image I got. This is the meaning of this line. See, something very usual, not that usual, but something that belongs to the Irish tradition. See, the immigrants who had no room for sleeping, no beds, nothing. They used it. It was literal. They used it to sleep over a rope. See? So, it is, in Portuguese, it is to sleep over a rope. How could I explain that? I cannot add this picture every time, see? So, with a note explaining that it is. We don't have anything similar to that in Portuguese. It's not a tradition here, okay? And the last one is the anthology, this 100 books, that is a classic book already, see? And the poems I brought here, well, I think there's no need to say much about Seamus Heaney, see? But he won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1995. So the implications here in the anthology, to keep the themes, see, the main ones: nature, the natural world, the struggles of one's Irish upbringing, family life and death, evocation of Irish rural life, allusions to Irish myth and historical events. And examples. The very first one called my attention because of a detail, that is the title. The title is Requiem for the Croppies. And in the original, there is a note. This is the only note in the book for the word croppies. Thank God. And then it is explained by someone I really don't know. Because as a translator, I would not have this, let's say, it was not part of my my project or my job, in fact. So this is just to show you that sometimes Saint Jerome is by our side. The second one, the second example. No, the next one. It's not moving.
They're open. I don't know what it is.
Oh, I see. So, just to, later on you may, yeah, this is the one. It's another visual example again. So, the poem is called The Harvest Bowl. And we don't have anything similar to that. What is a harvest bowl? It's something when it's the harvesting time, people use to celebrate that, to indicate that they are happy with all the results of that. Nothing similar to us, say, to our culture here. So, fortunately, there was room for, please, Luciana, the next one. In my translation, I just somehow, not forced, not, but I, let's say, spotted a few things, like, so this is an older situation, but I was able then to, in the title, say, laço de colheita, trançava o laço da colheita, trigo, coroa, palha, captando não dito no palpável, laços dourados, laço de colheita na lapela. So somehow revealing what is the cultural meaning of all that. And the last one, sorry, I think that my time is just over, but the last one, for me, one of the most difficult poems because of the cultural implications. Not because of the meaning, say, the literal meaning or things to be translated, but this poem, which is very much referred to in many anthologies, see, it starts with this question. See, the poem works if we pay attention. In this detail to whom was it addressed, and it was addressed to another poet, that is Symposium. So how can we transmit that? It's a very slight, let's say, detail, so people don't know who is Symposium. And the poem, that is sort of a dialogue, won't work, and I could not explain that. This is part of the frustration a translator has to deal with. Geographical references, they are okay, but there are some, let's say, problematic aspects. I will mention that in the part of the poem when we have our accents changed. Catholics in general don't speak as well as the students from the Protestant schools. This won't make any connection to our reality here. See, we do have Protestants, we do have Catholics, but how can we contextualize all that regarding, see, our reality here? So the poem is somehow, see, in deep need of this context to be understood, see? And, well, there are some other points, but I will finish here right after reading my conclusion, because I've written a conclusion. This is unbelievable almost. It's a short one. As I say, the dilemma of any translator is how to create a text enabling a reader to access the semantic content of the original and also preserve the poetic qualities of the original in terms of its form, the sonority, and all the other elements of poetry. In the organization of anthologies, many facts should be considered, and many interfere in the successful or unsuccessful result. As I mentioned, and these are the theoretical premises I adopt as a practical approach. One should take into consideration not only the Translation Act as a process of intercultural text transfer, but the translation process as well. In other words, the procedure that leads from source text analysis to the target text production. The intercultural text transfer could be achieved after a thorough mapping of the poems. So, preserving and adapting elements are of fundamental importance to keep the interplay between extratextual and intratextual factors, and the strategies to diminish the cultural distance are also essential in the whole translation process. But translators, even under the protection of Saint Jerome, our patron, will always have to deal with a certain amount of frustration, for our role as a bridge between two distinct cultures holds difficulties of accomplishing a good result. Fortunately, we can count on mechanisms of compensation and the help of creativity, but above all, we should persevere in our activity because translation or translating means revealing, means presenting, means sharing, which are among the most beautiful things our humanity may promote. Thank you.
Thank you. Is a translator and literature and literary theory professor. She now teaches postgraduate courses. She published articles, presented papers in conferences in Argentina and abroad, and co-edited published books on her research. External peer project and thesis evaluator for Argentina national and private universities. First president and co-founder of AEIS, Asociación de Estudios Irlandeses del Sur, member of ABE and SALIS. Founder and coordinator of the Ed O'Brien Colmacan Chair of Irish Studies and the Irish Diaspora at the National University of La Pampa, Argentina. I remember you in La Pampa. Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon and thanks everyone for being here. Thanks especially to Mira and Laura, dear friends, and to all the wonderful group of people that accompany them, because I have been coming here since 1998 or so. Really, we have always been very welcome here. So we later established strong links between both countries, and we continue to work together. So thanks to that. My topic today is I'm a translator, yes, and I have been working in translation for many years, but not with literary translation for many years. I used to be, and I still am, a public translator, a scientific translator, and as of my retirement in 2017, I devoted more time to the field of literary translation. So, in a way, I'm new to this special area of translation. And at the moment, and since 2020, the year of the pandemic, we have, I say we because I coordinate a group of 6 translators, we have been working with stories by Mary O'Donnell, Irish writer, who last year was part of the Olympic Symposium. And so, going back to what Lucy said, this is not a marketable project, but a project of our chair and of our research. Of course, our intention is to publish it and to make Mary sell the books
Okay, no, it's not that we want to keep the book because that would have no real function, okay? But the idea is that it all started as part of our research and part of our experimental work as literary translators. Well, but as I said, I'm not going to speak today about precisely the strategies or techniques related to translation. Fortunately, Lucy expressed in a wonderful way many of the things and the predicaments that the translators face. I was going to relate our work to one of the topics of this symposium, which is ethics and literature. So, the theme of this year's symposium is inspiring indeed and challenging. Which are the main roles of literature as a vehicle to communicate present-day issues to the future generations? Literature has always been involved with telling stories of real life in an imaginative mode, regardless of the genre used to do so. Poetry, fiction, drama, or the many subgenres that a writer may use, such as letters, memoirs, diaries, essays, etc. The telling narrative mode is at the heart of literature. Now, is literature meant to teach reader lessons of different kinds? This is a question. Does literature have a didactic purpose per se? Back in time, Argentine literature university professor and writer Raúl Cartanino, in his book ¿Qué es literatura?, conveyed his ideas on the nature of literature and its roles: entertainment, escapism, catharsis, commitment, and others. Okay? This last role, commitment, is interesting because although at that time Cartanino was referring to social, historic, and political responsibility, he asserted that literature, through imaginative and narrative resources, that is to say, the aesthetic role, posits questions for readers to think critically and ethically. In this presentation, I would like to show how Irish contemporary writers appeal to their readers' sense of ethics and responsibility, encouraging them to contemplate situations and characters' behaviors without necessarily trying to teach them a lesson, but stimulating their capacity to reflect on what is going on and maybe take positive action. Moreover, I will show how the process of translation helps disseminate ideas contained in the text and raise the awareness of larger audiences in different societies. The case of Mary O'Donnell's translated works will be referred to as an example. Let's consider as a first case a story written in 2020 the year of the pandemic, named, she gave 3 names to this story. The first one was Breakfast by the River. That's how she sent it to us. Then she decided to move the title to A Natural Process. And later was published in 2021 as part of a journal edited by the University of Florence, and she called it Speculations on a Dead Man's Body, a Living Woman's Ills. The story about a woman who goes on an everyday outing with her dog to have breakfast in a quiet area by the river Liffey presents readers with what it seems an easy-to-read text, beautifully written from the perspective of language, use, etc., and detailed descriptions. However, as the narrative unfolds, readers get a glimpse of the woman's predicament. Middle-aged, taking care of her elderly and ailing mother, Laura seems not in the least shocked, afraid, worried at the sight of a dead man's body by the river's edge, but found by her dog. She doesn't seem to even care at the sight of the corpse. She goes on with her morning rituals, sitting, making herself comfortable, drinking coffee and having some bread, enjoying her private moment there and then, undisturbed. Laura looks around and relaxes. That's what she needs. That's why she's there. She thinks. Yes, thanks. A woman can decide to be afraid and curtail her movement, or she can carry on as if she took almost the space of the world, along with all the other people, the men, rich women, people with jobs. She took as a job to do, but it isn't a paid one. End of the quote. Laura looks at death before her, then the corpse that the dog has found, and decides not to be hindered by its sight. She carries on and feels as if nothing had happened, as if she were the owner of that world. The description of the body's state of incipient decomposition is provided with detail and as one other element of the natural landscape of the area, a sight which, as a rule, would cause fear, astonishment, and doubt on passers-by, but not on Laura. She is not eager to rush and warn the police, not even to follow them. Breakfast by the river was one way of lightening. Breakfast by the river was one way of lightening the sense of burden which sometimes built within her, a bit like the thick river flow before it hit the pier and poured over in a ferocity of gray and white around the real thin legs of the watchful heathen. End of quote. According to Laura, there was nothing to be done, and thus she continued with her routine. The surrounding natural world, the river and its banks, the birds and other animals, and mostly her dog, appear not as a backdrop or parts of the setting, but as characters in their own right, playing their roles, mute interlocutors but active practitioners in Laura's life. Even the rain, frequent in the area, plays its part assuring Laura some extra time for her before coming to face reality. The usual summer deluge rarely poured before 11 o'clock. It suited her not to go to her mother Grace's house until after 11, gave her time to build herself up. Preparation was essential. Breakfast in the peace and quiet. Readers, witness what Laura is going through without raising her voice, without dramatizing a chronological sequence which many readers will find familiar. Elderly relatives taking care of them, restricting personal lives, frustrations and mixed feelings, exhaustion, mental illnesses, isolation, lack of support from other members of the family. The character goes on with her life and that of her demented mother as best as she can, but faces an ethical dilemma. What can or should a person do in a case like hers? The dilemma is not verbally displayed, but the following excerpt makes it clear. So, a few weeks earlier, Laura had stopped dispensing the nighttime blood-thinning tablet. She felt certain that there were other caring daughters and sons throughout the land who attempted to accelerate the natural process, whether from kindness or self-preservation. Without using the word, what we have is a variation of euthanasia. It would be omission in this case rather than commission. It's not that she's killing the directly, but she's omitting to give her the medicines, and so in that way she is gradually letting her die in a way. The decision not to administer the prescribed tablets would gradually bring about strokes, heart attacks, and untimely death, naturally, as the character states, but induced. Reading about the character's decision will place readers in a position to think, to balance, and even to judge the character's behavior. The text by itself is not meant to teach anything. It does not suggest what is to be done in this situation, which is fictional. It does not intend to have a moral value either, but it does, and indeed force readers to contemplate the course by which characters live by. There will be cases, most surely, in which the readers will accept or reject characters' decisions, and in this way, literature has ethical value, because it gives occasion to think about ethical questions like the one the story presents tacitly. Furthermore, the character in her own state of overtiredness or even derangement reflects on the effects of elder care on the environment. She wonders. Nobody ever considered the hazard to the environment presented by elder care. All those plastic aprons, gloves, and never-ending nappies. It wasn't solely the genuinely infantile whose needs created excess, but the senile infantile bodies, liquids and emanations comparatively vast and all with the right to life until they decided to let go of it. And like the poor sod she just discovered on the banks of the river. He didn't have any choice. And the sentence ends there. But tacitly we say, but my mother does have a choice. Or so is what we interpret. And the reader is kept thinking that elderly people, according to the narrative, do have a choice. Could be euthanasia or these other forms of variations. Now, when this text in its Spanish translation was read by members of our Chair of Irish Studies book club, they engaged in a heated discussion about the character's decision of reducing the medication prescribed to her mother to accelerate, between inverted commas, the natural process. In Argentina, euthanasia, on the one hand, is not an allowed practice according to law, but on the other, it is not a widely accepted procedure at the level of society. And even though what the character does is not exactly what would be termed euthanasia, the fact that the elderly mother is led to die gradually by not providing the right medicines was judged by some of the readers as a criminal practice, since it was one against the law and morally objective. However, others pointed to the fact that the doctor had the right to live and enjoy life, position which was difficult to support since the character's way out of the problem was judged as unethical. Others suggested the main character was also mentally ill, even though on the surface she didn't appear to be so. Thus, what we can see is that in our community, the discussion of the story was linked to the previous education, values, and knowledge of the readers, and the fact that the Argentine Constitution does not allow the practice of euthanasia was determinant at the moment of giving their opinions. Perhaps reading that same story in translation into another language would have a different set of opinions. Nonetheless, it is important to know that translation is not only a means to consecrate writers, as we said last year when we, in another round table dealing with translations, due to their skill, but also instrumental in the circulation of ideas and their discussion worldwide. In another story by Mary O'Donnell, Sobibor, the issue of Polish immigrants in Ireland is described. All the complexities related to migration processes are hinted through the description of Karina, Lauren's housekeeper, and her sexist partner who doesn't want to take up ordinary jobs because he used to be a scientist in Poland, but allows his wife to clean houses to earn their living. Through Karina's life story, we go back to the Nazi occupation of her home country, concentration camps and abuses in the past, and we also learn about the need to suppress history and memory, forget that abominable past and moving forward, as Karina's parents choose to do. They want to forget everything that had happened to them, and not just to the parents but to the grandparents. Besides Sobibor, the name of the story is the name of an extermination camp which was set in Poland. So, the story also moves forward in the description of Karina's present life with her abusive partner, jealous without reason, lazy and violent. He gets angry, says the character, with me all the time. Then he said that I'm friends with other men. And last night, here she paused and shook her head. Her voice dropped again. Something bad. He do something very bad to me. Children do not see, but he hit me. And then hit me again in our bed. A sense of sorority develops between the two women. Lauren, the other female character, trying to by all means to protect her employee and her children, despite Lauren's husband's opposition to her decision to send Karina and the children back to Poland to preserve them from the violent husband at home. Lauren feels she has to help her maid. The contrast in views as regards Karina's situation is marked and also reveals the selfishness of those who forget past difficulties. That could be the case of the Irish husband who prefers not to interfere with the situation of these immigrants. Lauren, aware of the risks Karina runs, her husband, on the other hand, minimizing the whole situation and not interested in risking his present and easy life to help immigrants, perhaps immigrants. The story discloses present-day cases in the post-Celtic Tiger era in multicultural Ireland, being now a country which receives rather than expels citizens from other parts of the world. What we see in this story is humans' responsibility not to forget the past and also how to move forward trying to help others, whoever those others might be, practicing empathy rather than sheer individualism. This is what readers can recover from reading. I would not like to go on further with this, these were just two examples, but I would like to say that the stories in the translated collection present topics which immediately connect with ethics and social responsibility, travelers and tinkers, intra-family violence, migration, terrorism, elderly people and their care, the disabled, the effects of the Irish property bubble, etc. Mary O'Donnell displays in her literary works a deep knowledge of all these topics, presenting them in a straightforward manner, full of lyricism as well, even though this is prose and not poetry, resorting at times to humor, perhaps in an attempt not to dramatize. Sharing her stories in translation means that those topics that are not exclusive of Irish society can be socialized, discussed, compared, contrasted with others somewhat similar from other cultures in the Spanish-speaking world, which, with their own overtones, may bring changes in the way we think and live our present-day world. Last but not least, in any way, as coordinator of the Edna O'Brien Columna Chair of Irish Studies, sorry, these are the topics that I just mentioned that appear in the stories in the collection. To end this presentation, I would like to point to the extraordinary work done by both writers, that is to say, the writers that give name to our chair, Edna O'Brien and Cory McCann. Extraordinary work done by both writers in their search for a better life, a more ethical and fairer one for all. Titles such as The Country Girls, Girl, The Little Red Chairs, Saints and Sinners, The Light of the Intonation, A Sample, and on the other hand, Everything in This Country Must, 13 Ways of Looking, a Parable of American Mother, just published this year, translated into multiple languages, give credit to their extraordinary work, not only entertaining people with their art and craft, but also generating dialogue, discussion and reflection at several levels. Literature has always contributed to develop our thinking capacity, appealing also to the emotions in relation to the material and immaterial world. As the era summons us to read the signals the planet is sending and to be aware of what we live on it at all levels, from our position of either writers, translators, or readers, we can, and I would say, continue, not start, to raise awareness to the fact that a better life is possible if we take the right actions and stop engaging with the wrong ones. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Yes. It's a great honor.
Introduce you. Sorry. Alzira Leite Vieira Alegre holds a doctor's degree in languages from USP. Presently, she teaches translation and literatures of English-speaking countries at PUC São Paulo, and literary translation at Casa Guilherme de Almeida. She has published articles on literature and translated various books in the area of humanities, besides being a sworn translator and author with many publications. She has recently organized and published with co-translator a collection of Canadian short stories on Canada, Contos Clássicos Reunidos. I have read this collection and I enjoyed it very, very much.
Thank you, Professor Moreira. It's a great honor to be here, to have been invited by Professor Laura, and to be participating in this highly qualified roundtable. I'm a small fish here, but I think what we share in common, what we have in common is that we are lovers of literature, and I've learned to enjoy and to like and study Irish literature since my early years at school. How can I say so? Besides the trepidation that takes possession of me whenever I am in this situation, I'll say I'm stage shy
I still have to face another problem, a very serious one, which is time. So I have two enemies here, but I'll try to fight them. I prepared something written, but I'll try to be more, to be quicker. I'll say something here. I was invited by Professor Laura to say something about the translation I did for Professor Muir's collection, right? Of a short story by one of my favorite writers of Irish literature, Frank O'Connor. One of my favorite writers. I would say that very few writers in modern literature can portray children from their own point of view rather than from an adult point of view better than Frank O'Connor. And I was very happy when the professor invited me to translate one of his stories. So my main focus here, because I don't have much time, my main focus will be on my translation of O'Connor's short story, The Babies in the Wood. I'll talk about it a bit later. But I would first like to make some comments on O'Connor's great skill to portray children in O'Connor's fictional world and to express their genuine feelings by creating a discourse which conveys his young characters' naivety, sincerity, innocence, frustrations, and disappointments when they are confronted with an adult world and all the complexities of real life. So it is in the immediacy and liveliness of the dialogues between children and adults that we see O'Connor's ability to show his young characters from their own point of view, rather than from an adult point of view, even when the story is told by an adult, recollecting his memories of childhood. In my view, not repeating what I've just said, many authors that include children in their fiction manage to recreate childhood as so sympathetically and so touchingly as O'Connor does. But before I go straight to the point by discussing my translation, I would like to use as an introduction to what I've just said some excerpts from two other of his short stories which have children as main characters. I guess that many of you probably know these stories. The first one is My Oedipus Complex, and the other one is First Confession. So I would like to, I invite you to put to test what I've just said, how well he can capture the children's feelings as characters. So let's go. Can you read? My Oedipus Complex. I selected some excerpts. I'm sorry if I'm giving spoilers here, but that was the best way I found. I decided to show the practical thing, the translation itself, or the thing, rather than discussing theories which my colleagues have done so well. So My Oedipus Complex is, as you can see here, is a first-person narrator, an adult writing in retrospect. Larry is 5 years old. His father is away at war. He and his mother pray for father's safe return from the war. Father was in the army all through the war, the first war, I mean. So up to the age of 5, I never saw much of him, and what I saw did not worry me. Father comes back. The war was the most peaceful period of my life. Larry's father is back after his back. He gets nervous with his son and he says, "Do be quiet, Larry." His mother, she said impatiently, "Don't you hear me talking to Daddy?" This was the first time I heard those ominous words, "talking to Daddy." And I couldn't help feeling that if this was how God answered prayers, he couldn't listen to them very attentively. "Mommy," I said that night when she was tucking me up, "do you think if I prayed hard, God would send Daddy back to the war?" I was disappointed about that. I began to think that God wasn't quite he was cracked up to me. "Shut up, you little puppy," he said in a choking voice. Never had anyone spoken to me that tone before. It was only then that I fully realized how God had caught me listening to my prayers for the safe return of this monster. After a new baby is born, I said in a loud voice, "If another bloody babe comes into this house, I'm going out." These are just for you to have a taste of it. And first confession is a first person narrator, just like the previous one, and the narrator is looking back in time. Jackie, 7 years old, he tells about his internal conflicts, about being prepared for his first confession. Fragment of the opening paragraph. "All the trouble began when my grandfather died and my grandmother, my father's mother, came to live with us. My grandmother was a real old country woman and quite unsuited to the life in town. She had a fat, wrinkled old face, went down the house in bare feet. For dinner, she had a jug of porter and a pot of potatoes. She poured out the potatoes on the table and ate them slowly, using her fingers by way of a fork." About the woman who prepares him for his first confession. An old woman called Ryan prepared us and talked to us of hell. She may have mentioned that other places well, but that could only have been by accident, for hell had the first place in her heart. But the worst of all was when she showed us how to examine our conscience. Did we take the name of the Lord our God in vain? Did we honor our father and mother? I asked her, did this include grandmothers? And she said it did. Going to confession. With the fear of damnation in my soul, I went in, and the confessional door closed of itself behind me. He takes the place, the confessional, and he takes the elbow rest as a kneeler. Can you imagine the trouble he was? It was pitch dark and I couldn't see priest or anything else. In the darkness, it was a matter between me, God and me, and he had all the odds. I knelt to one wall and said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. This is my first confession." It must have been then that I noticed the shelf at about one height with my head. It was really a place for grown-up people to rest their elbows, but in my distracted state, I thought it was probably the place you were supposed to kneel. Of course, it was on the high side and not very deep, but I was always good at climbing and managed to get up all right. Staying up was the trouble. There was room only for my knees, and nothing you could get a grip on but a sort of wooden molding a bit above. I held on to the molding and repeated the words a little louder. A man's voice said, "Who's there? What are you doing up there? What's the trouble to you, Jackie?" "Father, I had it all arranged to kill my grandmother." "Father," I said, kneeling, very sorry for myself. "She's an awful woman. She takes porter, Father, and snuff, Father." After the confession, he meets Laura, his sister. They don't get along very well. And Laura asks, what did he give you? 3 Hail Marys, I said. 3 Hail Marys, she repeated incredulously. You mustn't have told him anything. I told him everything, I said confidently. About Gran and all, about Gran and all. Did you tell him you went for me with the bread knife? She asked with a frown. I did, to be sure. And he only gave you 3 Hail Marys? That's all. Lord God, she wailed bitterly. Some people have all the luck. It's no advantage to anybody trying to be good. I must just as well be a sinner like you. I think you can have, if you put to test, there is everything of his, the way he feels. And the narrator, he describes from an adult point of view, but he puts a tone language into the boy's mouth. And now I'm moving and I'm shifting from English into Portuguese. There will be some English in between here, but I was to translate this. The title of the story in English, The Babies in the Wood. Literalmente impossível traduzir. It's an idiom in English which means a person, individual being naive, being innocent. And I think I spent many nights thinking about the best title. I even talked to Professor Unina. And then I had The Babies in the Wood. Ok, Os Inocentes. Não me parecia uma coisa muito boa, coisa de filme, de título. Pensei e resolvi colocar inocência, porque abrange as personagens todas. So this is a story, a third-person narrator, the story of Terry, a 5-year-old boy who lives in the countryside. You must have the context for you to understand the story. Follow me. Lives in the countryside with Mrs. Early and her son, Billy, a woman who for him is his aunt, visits him frequently. Terry has a 9-year-old friend, Florrie, who lives in the village. Terry's aunt is visiting him in the country. Veja aqui, eu trouxe algumas coisas para você. Não, só cigarros para Billy. Que Deus abençoe, senhorita Connors, diz Billy. Isso aqui é para você e aqui estão algumas coisas para o jantar. E o que foi que a senhora trouxe para mim, titia? Terry perguntou. Ah, Terry, ela disse consternada, eu me esqueci de você. É mentira. É verdade, eu me esqueci de você, disse ela com uma expressão trágica. Juro que é verdade. Ou será que é isso mesmo? O passarinho me contou alguma coisa. O que será que ele disse? Que tipo de passarinho ele era? Terry perguntou. Era um tordo? Daquele tipo grande, cor de cinza? Ele mesmo. Aquele velho tordo que vive cantando no nosso quintal. E sabe o que foi que ele pediu para trazer para você? Um barco, gritou. Um barco, gritou Terry. Era um barco. He's talking to his aunt. Ela era muito divertida. Terry gostaria que ela o visitasse com mais frequência. Quando ela aparecia, ele se esforçava ao máximo para parecer adulto. Durante toda aquela manhã, ficava lembrando a si mesmo. Terry, não se esqueça que você não é mais um bebê. Você sabe muito bem que já tem 9 anos. É claro que ele não tinha 9 anos. Tinha apenas 5. E era rechonchudo. Mas 9, a idade de sua amiga Florrie, era a idade que ele gostava de fingir que tinha. Com 9 anos dá para entender tudo. Havia coisas que Terry ainda não entendia. He's talking to his aunt. Você gostaria de morar comigo, Terry? Tem certeza? Ela perguntou como se estivesse caçoando dele. Você tem certeza de que não iria se sentir sozinho, longe da senhora Early, de Bill ou de Flor? Tenho certeza, titia. Pode acreditar, ele disse com a voz tensa. Quando a senhora vem me buscar? E para onde a senhora vai me levar? Para a cidade? Bem, tem um moço muito simpático da Inglaterra que quer se casar comigo e me levar para lá com ele. É claro que eu disse a ele que não poderia ir embora sem você. E ele disse que você poderia ir também. Isso não é maravilhoso? Onde é que fica a Inglaterra? Que tipo de lugar é a Inglaterra, titia? Ah, é uma beleza de lugar, disse a tia com sua costumeira voz alta e cheia de entusiasmo. Nós 3 viveríamos em uma casa grande, só nossa, com luzes acendendo e apagando e água quente nas torneiras. Todas as manhãs você iria comigo para a escola na sua bicicleta. Eu ia ter uma bicicleta só minha? Terry perguntou. E a gente ia ter um parque só nosso também? Não só nosso, haveria outras pessoas também, meninos e meninas com os quais você poderia brincar. They go for a walk in the countryside. Então ela retirou seus óculos escuros e, abraçando os joelhos, contou-lhe a história de Caixinhos Dourados. Fez isso com tanto entusiasmo que chegou ao ponto de atuar, rosnando e gemendo e rastejando-se de 4 com os cabelos cobrindo-lhe os olhos, até que Terry gritou assustado e ao mesmo tempo fascinado. Sua tia era mesmo o máximo. Terry talking to Florrie and letting the cat out of the bag. He had promised his son not to reveal anything about the marriage. Ela vai casar. E com quem ela vai casar? Florrie perguntou como quem não quer nada, mas Terry notou que ela estava de fato estupefata. Com um homem da Inglaterra, e eu vou morar com eles. É isso aí. Um homem da Inglaterra? Florrie repetiu. E Terry percebeu que dessa vez ela havia sido realmente nocauteada. Florrie não tinha ninguém que pudesse levá-la para a Inglaterra. E a inveja a estava deixando enlouquecida. Florrie, Terry, the truth about him and his age. Ela finge que é sua tia, mas todo mundo sabe que ela é sua mãe. Ela não é minha mãe, gritou Terry. Minha mãe morreu. A sua mãe não está morta não, garotinho. Ela arranjou um encrenca com o homem e foi obrigada pela mãe dela a mandar você para cá. Ela precisava se livrar de você. O vilarejo inteiro sabe disso. Você é uma mentirosa muito suja, Florrie Cress. Deus vai matar você por causa disso. Em seguida, ela saiu na direção do bosque, virando-se 1 ou 2 vezes para olhar para ele de um modo estranho. Ele a fuzilou com o olhar e dançou e gritou com uma fúria histérica. Não tinha a menor ideia do que ela queria dizer, mas sentiu que, afinal de contas, ela levava vantagem sobre ele. Uma menina de 9 anos, malvada e mal educada, ele disse, e depois saiu correndo pelo bosque até chegar à casa da senhora Earl, soluçando. E para deixar as coisas ainda piores, sua tia não apareceu durante meses. Quando ela chegou inesperadamente, Terry teve que mudar de roupa às pressas, porque havia um carro esperando por eles na estação. O carro compensou o desgosto de Terry. Ele jamais havia entrado em um carro antes. E para coroar tudo, eles estavam indo para o litoral e sua tia havia trazido para ele um balde e uma tacinha. Terry is inside the car, Mr. Walker's car. They are going for a spin. Terry, lançando-se de um lado para o outro do assento, gritava para todos aqueles que conheciam. Primeiro eles ficaram boquiabertos, depois riram e finalmente acenaram para ir de volta. Terry continuou berrando mensagens, mas elas se perdiam no barulho do carro avançando. Billy, Billy, ele gritou quando viu Billy Burley do lado de fora da igreja. Este carro é da minha tia, estamos dando uma volta, eu ganhei um balde e uma pazinha. Florrie estava de pé diante do correio com as mãos nas costas. Cheio de magnanimidade e presunção, Terry dirigiu a ela um grito especial. E sua tia se inclinou e acenou, mas embora estivesse olhando, Florrie fingiu que não se reconhecia. Essa era a Florrie por inteiro, inveja até mesmo do carro. They go to the beach, at the seaside. Havia outras crianças brincando, fazendo castelos de areia, e ele resolveu fazer a mesma coisa, mas depois de algum tempo, para sua enorme irritação, o Sr. Walker veio ajudá-lo. Terry não conseguia entender por que, com toda aquela areia, o Sr. Walker não fazia seus próprios castelos. Agora vamos precisar de um portão, vamos? Perguntou o Sr. Walker, intrometendo-se. Tudo bem, disse Terry indignado. Agora o senhor vai brincar para lá. Ele estava feliz com a ideia de ter o Sr. Walker como pai. consegui ver nele a figura de um bom pai. Ele tinha os princípios morais corretos. Todos os domingos, com chuva ou sol, Terry tomava o caminho da passarela e da estação ferroviária até a via principal. Trazia seu balde e sua pazinha. Mr. Walker had disappeared. So this is the situation. Não era possível saber quando coisas desse tipo eram necessárias. Ele sentou-se junto à mureta, perto dos homens, there was a pub, de onde podia ver os ônibus e os carros que vinham de ambas as direções. Algumas vezes, um carro cinza igual ao do Sr. Walker aparecia na esquina, e ele corria bamboleando pela via na direção do carro, mas o rosto do motorista era sempre uma decepção. Um domingo, Flora veio da vila pela estrada principal. Está esperando alguém, Terry? Ela perguntou. Se você estiver esperando sua tia, fique sabendo que ela não vem, continuou Flora falando com doçura. E o homem do carro cinza também não vem. Ele foi embora para a Inglaterra. Em outra situação, Terry não teria travado a conversa, mas agora ele se sentia tão confuso que conversaria com qualquer um que pudesse lhe dizer que estava aprendendo sua tia e o Sr. Walker. Era horrível ter apenas 5 anos, porque ninguém jamais contava coisa nenhuma a um garoto de 5 anos. Florrie talking to Terry in the same situation. A mãe dela não deixou. Ele já é casado. Se ela fosse com ele, ela levaria você também. Ainda bem que você não foi. Por quê? Porque ele é protestante, disse Flora vertigando. Os protestantes não têm uma religião séria como nós temos. Terry fez o que pôde para compreender como ter uma religião séria pudesse compensar uma pessoa pela perda de uma casa com luzes que acendiam e apagavam, um pai e uma bicicleta. Mas ele entendeu que ainda era muito novinho. Aos 5 anos, tudo ainda era complexo demais para ele. She keeps on talking to him. O homem que casou com ela é o dono da loja onde ela trabalha. E a senhorita Clancy, with whom she lives, diz que é uma grande surpresa eles terem se casado. E ele não gostaria que ela viesse aqui para ver você. Agora ela vai ter os filhos certos, entende? E nós não somos filhos certos? Ah, não, nós não somos, Flora disse com uma expressão desanimada. O que tem de errado com a gente? Essa era uma pergunta que Flora sempre se fazia, mas ela era altiva demais para mostrar um garotinho como Terry que não havia descoberto a resposta. Tudo, ela respondeu. Ela vai esquecer totalmente de você quando ela tiver outros filhos. A senhorita Clancy diz que elas são todas iguais. Ela diz que não vale a pena você esquentar a cabeça por causa disso, porque elas nunca pensam em ninguém a não ser elas mesmas. Ela diz que meu pai tem um monte de dinheiro. Se você se desse bem comigo, a gente poderia se casar quando você crescer mais um pouco. Por que você está chorando? Ela perguntou em tom condenatório. Eu disse a você quem ela era, mas você não acreditou em mim. Agora, olhe bem para você. Ela estreitou os braços e ele adormeceu. Ela o segurou. The repetition of ela here, because I compacted. Everything was compacted for this. Ela estreitou os braços e ele adormeceu. Ela o segurou de modo solene, observando com olhos desinteressados e curiosos. Ela adormeceu também e não percebeu que o trem noturno passava pelo vale. So, according to the title of my talk, translating O'Connor's translating his young character's voice into real life, I tried to translate O'Connor's translation of his fictional characters, his young children, to show all the complexities they face, frustrations, disappointments, their innocence, lack of embarrassment that they, and I hope you